Good morning. I am María, class of 2015, and welcome to day 2 of the Babson Connect Worldwide. Yesterday we enjoyed a day full of incredible conversations, and today we are fully prepared for a lot more. Again, I would like to thank our sponsors for their wonderful support in making this event happen. I want to thank the organizers of the event for doing a great job yesterday, so please let's have a round of applause for doing a great job. And the audience for showing up, thank you. I know a lot of you were out last night, so great job on making it back. It's great to see a good amount of faces here. I would like now to take the opportunity to introduce Marla Capozzi, the chair of the Babson College Board of Trustees. Marla has served as a leader of the McKinsey Global Strategy and Innovation Practice for 18 years. More recently, she is a leader in McKinsey Academy, the new global venture for client leadership development and capability building. I want to mention that when Marla was appointed to chair of the Babson College Board of Trustees in 2017, she was the first woman to serve as the chair of the Babson's board. In making this appointment, Babson became the only Massachusetts business school to have its two most senior governance roles held simultaneously by women leaders. So please, without further ado, please welcome Marla Capozzi.
Thank you, Maria. It's great to be here. For the record, this is my first Babson Connect, and it has been truly amazing. As we launch into the day 2, I wanted to take just a few minutes to reflect on yesterday. Yesterday was a packed day. I don't know about you, for me it felt like about 3 days passed during the course of the day. After hearing from Spain's Secretary of State, we then had a chance to hear from family entrepreneurs who talked about setting a 30-year vision for their companies, something that certainly Wall Street can learn a lot from, and to hear how passionate they were about not just today, but about setting that 30-year vision was incredibly inspirational. We also heard from global business CEOs who really talked about their vision and strategy and culture as they're leading large global institutions in these times of digital transformation and change. Fashion leaders and icons inspired us from the standpoint of their determination as well as how they're innovating with technology. And I thought the new clothing line for people with disabilities was also truly inspirational. And you hear things like that and you think to yourself, really, this is the first time somebody thought of doing something like that? And so that was also amazing to hear. Raj Sisodia offered a completely different perspective for us on corporate social responsibility and brought our attention to our responsibility to focus on how people are suffering and reminded us that there is no limit to the impact that we can have. Our impressive global scholars, if they're here today, reminded us in the audience who are alumni that there is no chance we would have gotten into Babson today, just for the record. The venture capitalists reinforced that Babson's philosophy on ET&A is how they run their business and could not be any more relevant today than in the future. So a couple of themes that I heard yesterday as I listened to all of these amazing conversations that were so authentic and honest as well. Everyone seemed to talk about setting a vision that inspired people. They talked about having the courage to take the right steps and the next steps and sometimes the first steps, which was also incredibly inspirational and applied no matter how old you are. These did not feel like messages that were just for students. They were for all of us. And most importantly, and really relevant since we're here at Babson Connect, the message of people came out loud and clear. So hearing that people are the source, not the resource, was an amazing reframing that Raj gave us. People talked about memorable moments and all of their stories about how just connecting with one person changed the trajectory of their lives and their business. And that we are as good as the people that we surround ourselves with. So given that we are all here today, I think we are pretty good on that one. And my personal favorite, how do we bless those behind us? I think that's certainly a quote that we're all going to remember from today. So this could not be more relevant for us here at Babson Connect. And as we go into day 2, what we're going to do today is we're going to start by celebrating our distinguished, the newest inductee into our Distinguished Academy of Entrepreneurs and the Lewis Institute Changemaker Award. And these are people who are truly amazing and now are part of our community, who have focused on triple bottom line. We'll move into some conversations on global healthcare and the world of luxury brands. And we're also going to learn how to live a startup life, for those of us who may not know how to live a startup life, and also manage your fears from a Spanish bullfighter. Because if anybody can teach us how to manage our fears, I'm hoping it's a Spanish bullfighter. And we're going to conclude with a conversation on leveraging the Babson network before we head into our gala. So I just wanted to share some of the reflections from yesterday, which was a really packed and amazing day. We're going to have another one today, which is going to be just as exciting. And I'm going to turn it over to Carrie, who's going to introduce our award inductees.
Thank you, Marla. That was an incredible recap. I think that we all were intellectually stimulated and to some degree exhausted by yesterday, but in a good way, in a very good way. So we've made a lot of good friends and renewed a lot of acquaintances as well. One of the wonderful new friends that we had the opportunity to meet this week in Valencia was Juan Roch. On Thursday, I had the honor of inducting Juan Roch into the Academy of Distinguished Entrepreneurs. He is the president of Mercadona, but also so much more, as we learned. Since 1978, the Academy has recognized and welcomed many of the world's most well-known names and accomplished entrepreneurs into its ranks. Academy members represent companies that are highly regarded in their industry and household icons in their culture. Collectively, the members of the Academy have created tens of millions of jobs around the world and transformed countless lives. They've also inspired generations of entrepreneurs to follow in their footsteps and to find new ways to create solutions to the world's largest challenges. The energy and innovation embodied by these individuals is going to be applauded by generations to come. And Juan Roch's talent and vision and leadership make him a natural addition to this prestigious group. As president of Mercadona, Mr. Roch presides over Spain's leading supermarket chain with more than 1,600 stores and more than 89,000 employees. He's an innovative leader committed to the simultaneous creation of value focused on the triple bottom line, as we learned from our discussion with him and Raj Sisodia. And he is also a philanthropist, supporting the next generation of entrepreneurs here in Spain. Mr. Roch serves as the honorary president of EDM, of Valencia Business School, which is also a member of the Babson Collaborative of Entrepreneurship Educators. He is also founder of the Marina de Empresas, in which EDM is located, also with an incubator, Lanzadera, and the Angels, a place where investors can also be part of that ecosystem. Through the Marina de Empresas, Mr. Roch is fostering a vibrant and innovative entrepreneurial ecosystem, supporting entrepreneurs who have an impact on the world. Mr. Roch exemplifies Babson's vision of an entrepreneurial leader who creates economic and social value simultaneously, transforming lives and businesses for the better. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Roch to the Academy of Distinguished Entrepreneurs and watching this short video recap of the ceremony on Thursday. Thank you. It is an honor now to welcome Mr. Roch to the stage and to the Babson community as a member of the Academy of Distinguished Entrepreneurs. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Roch.
I am accepting this award with great enthusiasm, as it has been granted to me by an institution we share the same concepts for teaching entrepreneurs. Si das, recibes, y además dar es lo más bonito que hay. en esta vida, ¿no? Y esta es nuestra filosofía y es una de las razones del éxito de Mercadona, ¿no? Que el éxito está basado, y lo hemos repetido, en el the boss, el cliente, los trabajadores, los proveedores, que es muy, muy importante, la sociedad y el capital. Tienes que seguir un orden, que ese orden se empieza por el cliente y que es igual de importantes todos ellos. La razón de Marina de Empresas, ¿no?, es que si alguien descubre cómo incrementar la satisfacción del cliente, hay emprendedores. Y si estos emprendedores, que es los que estáis muchos de vosotros aquí, creáis empresas, pues estas compañías crean empleo y este empleo pues crea riqueza, ¿no? Y si la riqueza, los políticos y todos nosotros sabemos distribuirla, pues se crea muchísimo bienestar en la sociedad, ¿no? En Marina de Empresa, los que estamos aquí, es formar y asesorar y financiar a los emprendedores de hoy y del futuro. Y nuestro objetivo es que haya nuevas empresas y nuevos ejecutivos. This book is the book of the professor Sisodia. Reading the entire book, I have come to the conclusion that Mercadona is a company that practices conscious capitalism. Yo he disfrutado haciéndolo y ahora disfruto apoyando a otros para que lo intenten. Es un verdadero honor para mí que Babson me haya reconocido y que sigamos remando juntos para fomentar el emprendimiento inspirado en el modelo de calidad total o capitalismo consciente. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias, moltes gràcies y bon dia.
Well, thank you, and please welcome to the stage now Cheryl Kiser, who is Executive Director of the Lewis Institute and Babson Social Innovation Lab, to announce our Lewis Changemaker inductees.
Thank you, Carrie. Good morning. The Lewis Institute for Social Innovation is an incubator of entrepreneurial thinkers and actors who desire to be change makers. We provide our students with the mindset, skill set, and pathway to their purpose in order for them to effectively create value in a world where the social contract between business and society has dramatically changed, and where the purpose of business is being redefined. Our students have a bias towards making a difference and wanting to do something that matters. Our aspiration is to educate our students to be leaders who create economic and social value simultaneously, understanding that social purpose is not a nice to do, but a business essential. Our aspiration is that our students help redefine the purpose of business through a social innovation mindset in startups, inside companies, in government, and the social sector. Finally, we incubate and cultivate our students to be change makers who will have the courage to challenge the status quo in service to creating a more just and sustainable world. Today, I am honored to present the Lewis Institute Community Changemaker Award to two incredible women making a difference and having an impact around the world. This award was designed specifically to recognize individuals who have set something in motion in order to create positive change. María Teresa Fernández de la Vega, permanent member of the Spanish Council of State and president of the Women of Africa Foundation, and Leila, Janah, founder and CEO of Samasource and LXMI, and author of Give Work, are doing just that. First, Leila Janah, in 2008, founded Samasource, born out of the belief that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. Leila and Samasource believe that work is the most effective and comprehensive way to reduce poverty. Through sustained employment, people invest in healthier food, education, safer housing, and savings, lifting themselves and their families out of poverty. Since its founding, Samasource has provided dignified digital work to nearly 10,000 people in Kenya, Uganda, India, and Haiti, completing projects on behalf of some of the world's largest and most visible corporations. Recently, Leila expanded her focus and founded a second enterprise, the luxury skincare line, LXMI. With LXMI, the product is different, but the mission is the same: to give work, provide a living wage, and empower marginalized East African women. In her new book, Give Work, Leila shares insights from her experience as a social entrepreneur and describes a new pathway to alleviating global poverty, providing dignified, steady, fair wage work to low-income women. At Babson, we talk a lot about social impact, and we strive to educate entrepreneurial leaders who will create economic and social value simultaneously. Leila embodies the mission. She has set in motion something extraordinary, a new way of tackling some of the world's most pressing problems, and a new approach to work, commerce, and social impact. Leila is challenging business as usual and truly transforming lives, businesses, and communities for the better. I am honored to present Leila Janah with the Lewis Institute Community Changemaker Award. And before we bring President Healey and Leila up for conversation, please draw your attention to the video.
2 billion people want to work but lack access.
If you want to build middle classes and you want to build strong economies, you have to help people get jobs.
These regions, the poverty rates are extremely high. We're talking about countries where the average income is between $2 and $3 a day.
We have to keep a relentless focus on job creation.
So many problems, from sex trafficking to infant mortality, are fundamentally rooted in poverty and lack of access to dignified work.
It also seems like just an impossible thing to get around. How could you ever overcome it when there aren't any opportunities?
It is called impact sourcing, a unique model that brings tech jobs to women and youth in impoverished communities around the world.
Some of the biggest tech companies in the world are using this as clients. Samasource founder and CEO.
Leila Janah.
She started Samasource. It connects companies such as Google and eBay with digitally skilled workers.
I just love this idea. Talk to me about how it works.
We are a different kind of technology company. We build tools to connect the world's poorest people using a concept that we invented called micro work. Through the internet, we can now tap the world's greatest underutilized resource, the brain power of the bottom 4 billion people. We're making it possible for people like refugees and women in rural parts of Pakistan to access those types of work. Sama Group is a family of social enterprises with a common mission to ensure that all human beings can afford to live with dignity. Technological progress means nothing if it doesn't equate to human progress. Sama means equal in Sanskrit, and our mission is to give work rather than handouts. Work is at the core of human dignity. It's how we define ourselves. It's how we make our contribution in the world. A living wage transforms lives.
So, Leila, I'm endlessly impressed with your achievements, and I have to share with everyone here that the first time I saw you, you were actually about 20 feet in the air, kite surfing. And I thought, if this is impossible, first of all. And then secondly, when you landed perfectly and came out, and then I learned all this about you. It's only become more impossible over time to imagine everything that you've accomplished. Can you give us a little bit of sense about your journey to where you are today, because you are still very young, and I'm sure that there are a lot of young entrepreneurs, a lot of students out there who are wondering, how did this happen in such a short period of time? How have you founded these companies? What inspired you? Tell me a little bit about your journey.
Sure. First of all, I'm really honored and extremely humbled to be here, because I think what I've done is very small relative to what most of you have built in the audience, so thank you for highlighting our work. I was inspired to start Samasource actually from a very young age. My parents both grew up in India. My mom is from Calcutta, which is a very poor city. And I was made painfully aware by my parents that I happened to draw a winning ticket in the birth lottery by being born in a wealthy country. And they would always make it known that were it not for this accident of birth, we could easily have been born into a slum or anywhere else around the world. And so it was really evident to me when I was growing up that we do not live in a global meritocracy, and the vast majority of very low-income people are deprived of the basic opportunities that I had growing up. And this became really true for me personally. I went to Africa right before starting college. I spent 6 months volunteering in a rural village in Ghana. And my ideas about Africa had really been shaped by the American charity model. So I assumed I would go to this poor school and that these kids would be starving and kind of helpless, and I would go there and save them. So I get there, and my students could name US senators. They listened to Voice of America radio. They probably knew more about what's happening in our government than my high school colleagues did, to be honest. And I was shocked by how much raw human talent there was in a place like Ghana. And people had no opportunity, no corresponding economic opportunity. And so I became really interested in models that would uplift people through job creation, and not just any jobs, but jobs that paid living wages and paid attention to their well-being.
So tell me, how did you engage with the tech community to start creating Samasource?
So right after college, I worked as a management consultant, and my first assignment, they said, well, you're Indian, so we're going to ship you off to India. And we have this big outsourcing client that we're trying to take public, and I was very young. I was in my early 20s. I had no idea, what it meant to go public, really, and I kind of learned on the job. And I was sent there, and I helped this 10,000-person outsourcing firm realign their organizational behavior. And one of the things that struck me when I was there is how there were some young people who were commuting in from slums who were working in the call center by day. And a little light bulb went off in my head, and I said, wow, here's the kind of work that I may have been looking for. These are people who come from $2 a day backgrounds who are working in this fancy call center. Maybe there's a way that some of this new digital work, which Tom Friedman wrote about in the book The World is Flat, probably most of you have read about it or heard about it, maybe there's some way we can figure out how to connect those types of jobs in the new, what we call virtual assembly line, to this new kind of labor. And so we became a pioneer in a field that's now known as impact sourcing, which involves training very low-income people who don't have any formal work experience. Typically, they're coming out of the informal economy. Many of our workers were literally working in quarries or selling things by the side of the road. But people who are literate, so they have a secondary school education, and we train them to do basic tasks on the internet. And we happen to get very lucky and start doing this just as artificial intelligence and machine learning was growing as a field in Silicon Valley. And so now our biggest customers are hiring us to do complex image annotation and tagging for fields like computer vision and industries like autonomous vehicles. And now AI and machine learning are cutting across every industry, right? Everyone is trying to figure out how to automate more of their routine processes. And we happen to be in Silicon Valley and be a known, high quality service provider just at that time. So we now employ close to 2,000 full-time people doing this kind of work, mostly in East Africa.
And do you think that there's a way that people who are here today could understand how to source the kinds of things that you've sourced there? So it's really a question of connecting entrepreneurs and business people here in the wealthier world to places where people really need jobs. How do you do that?
Yeah, and we actually also have a program in the US. We're a very odd bird in Silicon Valley because we're technically a 501c3 nonprofit, although the international business I just mentioned for Samasource is now profitable off of our earned revenue. So very strange. We're an intentional nonprofit in Silicon Valley that's profitable. And then we have another division in the US called Sama School, which trains low-income people to enter the gig or freelance economy. And we've shown that you can actually teach people who've been chronically unemployed for more than a year to earn living wages through the gig economy. So I can talk about that later, but it's a slightly different model. And I think our sourcing kind of concepts can even apply to poor communities in the US. So it's not just between the West and the developing world. One thing I've learned is that people often think that if you're sourcing from lower income communities that the quality is necessarily worse. And what we try to show is that actually you can have a higher quality product if you have a very dedicated workforce. And in our case at Sama, we have 4% attrition, which is in the outsourcing industry a total anomaly. If you look at macro trends in outsourcing in the Philippines or in India, you tend to have really high turnover. There's not a lot of loyalty. These aren't companies that people are thrilled or super excited in general to work for. And so part of the fact that we have a social mission or, I think part of the benefit of that is that we have much lower attrition and really strong loyalty and dedication from our workforce, which leads to a better quality output. And so we like to say that, you know, product is king. The experience that the client has with Sama is the most important thing. The social mission is what makes it sticky, but it's not going to draw a product manager at Google to hire us.
And when do you interview the people who you're about to hire, and what are you looking for in them?
Sure. So we are really lucky to be part of a broader community of non-governmental organizations. There's no shortage of NGOs where we work that are working with low-income people from the slums and from rural areas. And so we tap into them as recruiting partners. And what a lot of the community-based organizations that do youth development are trying to find is job opportunities for the people that go through their programs, right? So they have better outcomes if they're able to get people into full-time jobs. And we have better outcomes if we're able to recruit people who have already gone through some kind of livelihoods development or training. And so we look for motivation. We have a whole assessment that we do. We embed our trainers in these community-based organizations in the slums, and then we recruit from that pool. And we have a whole curriculum we develop that we give away for free called Digital Basics, which is basic computer training. So you can imagine someone who's worked in a quarry, he or she may have had a cell phone or may know what a cell phone looks like, so they understand the basics of, it's interesting, I joke that like, it's harder for me to explain sometimes to my dad how to like use his phone than it is to people who don't have a lot of formal experience with a computer but may have grown up around cell phones, as many young people now in East Africa do. So, so that part's not the tricky part. I think the tricky part is helping people understand how to work in a formal environment for the first time. If you grew up in a slum doing informal work, you're not used to showing up in an office every day. You're not used to having to take public transportation to get there, and so it's more of that sort of sensitivity that we're building.
So you've been experimenting with different types of impact companies. And so can you talk a little bit about your cosmetic company and how that's structured differently and what the concept is behind that?
Sure. So I should note, first of all, Samasource is 10 years old this year in September, and we have a very experienced leadership team. So I am not running every aspect of the day-to-day. I'm really lucky to have that. And only once we had that in place and when we became profitable did I launch this new thing. And it's still kind of a bad idea, I think, to have two companies at the same time. So trying to figure a way out of that. But I started LXMI because I was going back and forth to East Africa really often for work. And we work in northern Uganda, which is a very poor community, mostly known to Westerners for this brutal civil war that took place there for 20 years, in which a warlord named Joseph Kony was abducting child soldiers. So kind of the brand of northern Uganda outside the country is mostly fixated on this civil war. Well, we've been going there for a long time. We now operate the largest technology employer in northern Uganda. We have over 100 people working in our facility there doing image tagging for Getty Images. It's really surreal because they're literally looking at pictures of like Kim Kardashian and Beyonce and tagging them, and these are all people who mostly come from subsistence agriculture backgrounds, so they're riding their bicycles from the village into the center. So I'd go and visit our center, and I came across in the local market this amazing ingredient. It's a rare type of shea butter, and it only grows wild. It's a wild varietal. It only grows at the source of the Nile River on trees that take 20 years to mature. So I hear this story from a woman at the local market. I start using this stuff on my face. It's incredible. And I think to myself, why am I spending, like so many women, you know, we spend $150 an ounce on high-end skin creams at duty free. It's my one luxury purchase. My mom always taught me, never skimp on what goes on your face. So, you know, I'm buying this stuff. I read the ingredient label of the skin cream that I just bought at duty free on my way to Uganda, and it's full of, as I start doing research, of known carcinogens, of toxic ingredients, of toxic emulsifiers and preservatives and red number 7 or red number 5, one of those artificial colorants. And I'm thinking, here I am spending all this on a product that's doing no good for me and really no good for the world. Meanwhile, these women are producing something that is not only amazing for the skin, there's all these clinical benefits around it, but it's also good for the world. There's a fair trade supply chain behind it. And I thought, what if we could create a luxury brand and concept around some of these natural ingredients? Personally, I love I'm a California hippie, so I shop at Whole Foods for everything, including my skincare, but I want the woman who buys Dior and Prada to think about buying something that has a total ethical supply chain behind it. And why doesn't this exist already? So I went back to my board, I told them I had this idea, and they said, okay, well, will bless you. Go do this on the side. And I started LXMI, and we were the first fair trade brand to launch at Sephora nationwide in the US last year. So it's been, it's tough to build a consumer brand. I'm learning the hard way, but I'm really excited because it integrates some of the same give work principles that we've built at Sama, but into a luxury value chain. And I set it up as a for-profit company and donated a third of my shares to the nonprofit. So there's some link there.
And we talk a lot about the fact that for-profit companies can have profound social impact, just as Mr. Rocha's company was shown on Thursday. So you seem very, very optimistic. What makes you optimistic about the future of work, about lifting people out of poverty? You seem to be very capable and feel empowered to contribute to that.
I just see so much promise in how the mindset of the younger generation is shifting. When I was an undergrad, and you mentioned, I'd go across the river to Harvard Business School and mention social enterprise, and I was all but laughed out of the cafeteria. Now Harvard Business School has a social enterprise conference. Now I go to Babson and I meet young people who are undergrads who want to start businesses that have a social impact. And I think more entrepreneurs now that I talk to, more often than not, they want to integrate purpose with whatever company they're starting. If you look at surveys of millennials, trends show that a vast majority of them will switch brands to one associated with a good cause. And even more importantly than that, they want to work for a company that has purpose, and not just a CSR page, but a company that deeply integrates purpose into every aspect of its operations. And so I think it's interesting. I grew up when the ideal job after college was to go and get a banking job on Wall Street, and a lot of the folks who went and did that were not thinking purpose as their primary motivator. They were thinking, I'm going to get rich first and then maybe donate it at the end of my life and start, doing philanthropy then. Now people are realizing that the greatest good they can have might be within the enterprises they form at the outset, rather than waiting to make money and give it all away at the end of the day.
So every entrepreneur has challenges. Can you reflect a little bit on one of the biggest challenges that you encountered and overcame?
Yeah, there's almost too many to mention. One of the hardest things that happened to us was there was a shooting in the Westgate Mall in Nairobi. Some of you may remember it was a few years ago. I had 3 staff in the mall that day, one of whom personally witnessed people being shot in front of her. She was the head of our operation in East Africa. She'd also been at the World Trade Center when 9/11 happened. So it was just totally tragic and extremely traumatic. And I was a young CEO at the time and had no idea what to do. And here's this experienced senior leader. So I ended up just calling her and listening to her and getting her feedback on what we should do. And we were lucky to not have more people affected, and we were able to keep our operation running. But things like that happened all the time. We operate in Dadaab refugee camp. We have a training program there. Dadaab is one of the hardest places in the world to work. It's really kind of an abomination that these places still exist in 2018, where you have 500,000 people living in really abject poverty. They're not even allowed to leave. Dadaab was just flooded recently. So we have these sorts of challenges all the time. And I try to, in these moments of crisis, reflect on the fact that crisis is inevitable, especially if you choose, I think, a hard path of social enterprise. It's harder to do the right thing. I think it can take longer to get to profitability. There are many more obstacles that are almost self-created along the way if you choose to operate in a place where you're recruiting people from very disadvantaged backgrounds, but then the rewards are greater. So in those moments of crisis, I try to reflect on all of the positive stuff coming out of our centers, on the fact that on average, we move people out of poverty by 8 times. So we move them from an average of $2 a day to now over $16 a day in household income, which for this demographic, it's incredibly difficult to do that in any sustained way, and they stay out of poverty in the long run. So I try to focus my mind on the real positive data coming out of our work centers in these moments of crisis.
And I have to, given my first impression of you dangling up in the air, clinging on to that incredible kite surfing, tell me, how do you deal with fear? You seem impervious to it. You seem like you've just been able to go forward, but I'm sure that's probably not the case.
Yeah, I mean, I kite surf because it's the one sport where if you're not fully focused on not dying, then
you will like crash and burn. So it's like the one thing I do where I have to put all of my mental energy. I can't be stressed about work. I can't be thinking about that to-do item that I forgot about. I'm like fully focused on not dying. So that's why I kite surf, and I'm not nearly as good as Carrie's suggesting. But I guess I try to find ways to clear my mind, and I would say, other than kite surfing, meditation has really helped me. Vipassana meditation, which is a Buddhist form of meditation that involves focusing your mind on what's happening within your body and the present moment. And I'm really lucky to live part-time in the Bay Area, where we have a lot of resources around meditation.
Do you have some core beliefs that you express to your team? You obviously have a very capable team around you that's helped you implement your vision, and they seem like they've stayed true to that vision. What kind of advice, rules, inspiration do you offer to them?
I was really lucky that my father went to Jesuit school growing up he's from South India originally, from a Christian background. And those Jesuit priests, man, they get it right in many ways. And I think a lot of his value system came out of that foundation. And so when I started Sama, I think a lot of my ideas about business were really informed by those teachings. We have 4 values at the company: grit, humanity, integrity, and it used to be GSD, getting X done. Now it's getting things done, and we really try to live by those. So we use all these performance tools to measure KPIs and to do quarterly reviews and annual feedback. But we really tie everything back to those 4 values, and I think that's really important as we build a global culture. We just opened our first owned and operated facility in southern India, and we now have centers in Nairobi, in Kampala, in Gulu, in Uganda, and unifying the culture, the business culture that we have across all these locations can be challenging. So we try to go back to those core operating principles and those core values whenever we make decisions and evaluate people. Thanks.
Let's have a round of applause for Leila, Janah.
Well, thank you very much, Carrie and Leila. Now it is my honor to introduce María Teresa Fernández de la Vega, permanent member of the Spanish Council of State and president of the Women for Africa Foundation. Throughout her career, María Teresa Fernández de la Vega has been a changemaker and a trailblazer, advocating for human rights and women's rights in Spain and around the world. She made history in 2004 by becoming the first female deputy prime minister of Spain. She was the driving force behind the first and to date the only national plan for human rights approved in Spain, which she presented at the headquarters of the United Nations in December 2008. Throughout her time in government, she promoted policies to extend and enforce citizens' rights, with initiatives such as the Comprehensive Law Against Gender Violence and the Law on Equality, which placed Spain at the forefront of gender equality. Today, she is a permanent member of the Spanish Council of State, the top advisory body to the government of Spain. She is also the first woman to hold that position. In February 2012, she launched the Women for Africa Foundation. The foundation aims to promote development in Africa by supporting women, who we know to be the most powerful engine of progress in their societies, by supporting projects in the areas of education, knowledge, health, economic development, and empowerment. Women for Africa is making a difference in lives and communities across the continent. In keeping with the preeminent themes of María Teresa Fernández de la Vega's life and work, equality for women, and the belief that equality is the most powerful instrument of social transformation is central to the Foundation's mission. To achieve its goals, the Foundation partners with institutions around the globe, and Babson is proud to be among those partners. At the Lewis Institute, social innovation is not about breakthrough innovations, it's about breakthrough interactions. By seeking out and cultivating relationships with both usual and unusual suspects, we connect dots in expanded ways to better address societal dilemmas more effectively and more entrepreneurially. The life and work of María Teresa Fernández de la Vega, and in particular, her commitment to bettering the lives of women in Africa, is a shining example of how unique collaborations and entrepreneurial thinking can catalyze transformation. Please join me in welcoming María Teresa Fernández de la Vega and Carrie Healey. But before they come to the stage for another conversation, please draw your attention to the video.
Violence against women remains one of the most dehumanizing.
We are the youngest continent. We are the fastest. How does Africa access the technology?
Take responsibility, take action, be part of a movement.
Power is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story.
In the kind of research and in the kind of
the poverty, the lack of food, the lack of water, maybe related to the way they
arrive à se prendre en charge, arrive à respecter.
Sustainable peace is very important. That is part of security.
Parce que nos dons sont extraordinairement complexes. Un art de vivre, une philosophie et une science.
أود أن أعطي على سبيل المثال كيف
If you develop women and girls, indeed, you develop the rest of society.
Welcome. Very good. Yes, please. Yes, I'm not sure which one of these is working. Okay. Well, welcome. It's so wonderful to see you again. And as many people here know, Babson has had the honor of working with María Teresa and her wonderful Women for Africa Foundation on training some wonderful African women entrepreneurs. And as a former politician, I have to ask you, what motivated you to leave the world of politics, where you were very successful, and now move into this new world? And what was that transition like?
Well, good morning, President. I'm really very happy to be here and to have this opportunity to have this dialogue with someone
that I so admire for her commitment. And I do want to take advantage of this opportunity to thank you and Babson. And now to answer your question, I have always been in love with Africa. And I've always been an activist for equality and human rights. And that's really what drove me when I was still in office to promote a movement of women in Africa, which we called Women for a Better World. And I did that because I realized that when I was in government, whenever there was any problem with any African country, the only way to fix it was through a woman. And so that made me create or recruit a network of African women from areas of responsibility in different sectors, in politics, in business, in universities, in education. And we created that network of African and Spanish women. We held 6 conferences of Spanish women leaders and African women leaders, where we shared our views on problems and solutions, which we felt women from Africa and Spain together could approach. And that's how it all started. That's how Women for Africa started, because when I left office, I thought, I have to continue with this. I cannot lose track of these African sisters. And so that's how we started the Women for Africa Foundation, in order to spend a good part of my time, pretty much all of my time, because it's my passion, to working with African women.
So we have a number of people here in the audience today who do very important work in Africa in different areas. And I think that they would be interested in knowing some of the particular challenges that you're addressing. With us, you work on entrepreneurship training, but in other areas, I know you work in healthcare and others. Can you describe a little bit of the work of your foundation?
Yes, the foundation works to contribute to Africa's development through its women. And of course, the major challenges for women in Africa are the challenges faced by women everywhere. But as well as facing the challenges that the rest of us all face, they also have the challenges of living in a developing economy. And so their priorities, obviously, are putting food on the table for their children, giving their children the chance to go to school, so to get an education and healthcare, and having some kind of opportunity to build an independent life. And so these are their absolute priorities and concerns. And I have to say that ultimately, the solutions to all of these problems or challenges, the only lasting sustainable solutions, always come, as you well know, through knowledge transfer, through education. Education and knowledge are the gateway to freedom. And without that, you really cannot move forward. But apart from working in all sorts of education projects and knowledge transfer projects, starting with the very young girls all the way to graduates and entrepreneurs, we have a great advantage in Africa, which is the ability of African women to deal with all the challenges that life throws at them with tremendous energy, with tremendous strength, with amazing intelligence and perseverance and just incredible dedication. And that's really what's changing Africa, that's transforming Africa, because we just give them, from the foundation, opportunities and tools. We give them the means. For example, we have a women farming cooperative project in Gambia, which is basically teach them how to work with the land and draw power and give them tools, but then they are the ones who have managed to turn that model into an absolute success. And the Gambian government has now adopted our model for its own agricultural development projects. Because you give just a tiny, tiny push to an African woman and she turns it into an incredibly successful business. And so I really think that there's so much that we can learn ourselves from African women. And we also work in, well, as we said, education, entrepreneurship, healthcare, economic empowerment. We have a wonderful program, as you said, with you at Babson. We also have programs with NYU. We have a very interesting program for political leadership with Yale. And that's how we're managing to open these doors for African women, which they immediately cross and make their own and multiply them times 1,000.
Well, we are so grateful to have this partnership with you. We thank you for your incredible work in this area, and your connections to all of those powerful women in Africa have made it all possible. So we're so excited to honor you today, to thank you for your work, and we all admire you greatly. Please join me in congratulating María and Teresa. And now, yes.